and welcome to Boardgame Bonkers. I'm Jay Sears, and under the Meeple lights today we have Konieczka, who is the designer of our Star Wars Rebellion game. So welcome, Corey.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Thanks so much for joining us, and why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name's Corey Konieczka. I've been designing board games for almost 15 years now professionally. I started out working at Fantasy Flight Games, designed a ton of games there from Battlestar Galactica, StarCraft, um, Mansion of Madness First Edition, bunch of Star Wars stuff. And in 2019, left FFG to start up my own studio, Unexpected Games. We've released a few games so far, including The Initiative, which has been our biggest hit, but also 3,000 Scoundrels and Voices in My Head. And um, now our goals, we're trying to make unusual games that stand out from the hundreds of games you already have on your shelf.
Yeah, and certainly, Star Wars Rebellion, it was a big game when it came out. It's a big hit, and it's certainly up there in the Board Game Geek charts. And, Unexpected Voices, yeah, you're right, completely unique and different in how that works from other games. And I'm sure lots of people will be interested to see what else is coming from you. And I'm sure they'll be keen to try and find out if there's any particular, games you're working on or anything is there anything you can give away?
Uh, Not at the moment. We're working on a few different things. We're in the process of figuring out whether we've got a product coming out this year or not. It's going to depend on a few factors. And so that's one of the things. I'm in development for a game coming out next year that is far away from being announced. But hopefully we'll have new stuff to talk about in a month or two.
Fantastic. So for those watching this video that are not familiar with this format and what this is all about, so we'll be presenting 10 questions to our guest. And this is not a quiz, this is a Q&A with a twist. So what's the twist? Well, our guest has no idea what the questions will be. And we have no idea what questions will be coming out. That's because they'll be drawn from this ball. And when we finish with those 10 questions, we'll move them to the side. So future guests coming on will have 10 completely new, unique questions. So will our guests thrive on the Meeple lights, or will they be a little bit nervous? Well, we're about to find out as we present 10 questions to our guests. So, Corey, are you ready?
Yeah, let's dive in.
So we started off with 120, and as we dive down, obviously we will be reducing this count as we go along, bring more guests on the show, so we'll see what we've got left. There's a few fluffy questions in here, which is nice, but there are some thought-provoking questions about the board game industry, so we'll see what we draw out as our first question. Okay, so this is quite an interesting one. So what is the tool, app, or book you would recommend to someone to use when starting off in game design?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a tricky one. So I only have a few different books myself based on game design, but one of them I have sitting on my shelf is Rules of Play. Um, that's it's it's really a textbook kind of written on game design. And I'll be honest, I haven't read through the whole thing, but it seems pretty useful and thought-provoking for a designer. Um, the other book that springs to mind is, oh man, what is it called? There's another book that I've been reading. I think it's just called Theory of Design, and it's not even about game design. It's just about design in general. Wish I knew the name off the top of my head, but the cover is very thought-provoking. It's like a tea kettle with the handle on the wrong side, so that you would like burn yourself if you tried to pick it up. And it just talks about the design of like everyday objects and how um, a lot of thought actually has to go into these things. And I was fascinating as I was reading that book how much of that stuff translates to game design, because designing anything in the world is not just how you're going to interface with it, but it's how's your audience going to interface with it. So
Yeah, there's lots of different, there are quite a few books. I remember I read one actually, was looking at the kind of old designs from old classics, your Monopoly or Trivial Pursuit, and how the games have developed into Catan and how it evolved. And that was more of a kind of textbook to show the journey of board games. So there's different certain takes on books that can help you in different ways and get you to see things a little bit differently as you're designing games. Have you got any particular tools that you would use that you think would be helpful for someone starting off?
Yeah, it's tricky. Like for me, I've been designing games my whole life. Like ever since I was a kid, we would make up games with friends and family. Um, and so design for me often comes down to like following your instincts and following your gut and playing the game with people, getting good feedback, trying it again. Um, I think the one web tool that I do use frequently is there's some good probability calculators out there, especially if you're looking for like really odd probabilities. Like it's very easy to calculate how often a die face is going to come up when you roll it, right? And you can find resources for that online. But if you're looking for something more specific than that, for example, you're drawing three cards from a deck. What are the odds that you get a card with a value of 10 or higher? If you've got a deck of 100, that's 1 through 100. And so um, I use that one quite a bit when I'm looking at just how frequently a an unusual event can happen. So, for example, when you're designing a game, you might say, well, this whole thing falls apart if you draw nothing but ones and twos on your first turn, because then the game's unplayable. And you're like, well, how? Obviously, if the game's unplayable, you don't want that to happen. But if you can look at the math and you figure out the probability, like, well, that's going to happen one in every 10 million games. You're like, well, as long as it's not unplayable, maybe that's okay. Um, so probability calculators, definitely look them up. They're helpful.
There was certainly, I remember there was, I can't remember the publishing company that were in the middle of designing a game. It was, it's a card game. I'm sure it was a deck building game. And they used a system similar, and something had happened to the system, and it had to restart it all over again because they'd lost all the work they'd put into it. I can't remember what that publishing company was. And they were trying to explain that the kind of software they used was so important for determining the balancing of the game, the importance of creating those cards. And it was
Huh.
something they kind of reset it all over again, and they had to restart everything from scratch. They lost the work they had put into it, and they're explaining how that took months and months. And I'm thinking, okay, if that's took that you that much, but I can use that a kind of software to help you. And goodness know what how long it take without using that piece of software. You must have some powerful brain to work out the probability of things. But we'll put any links in the description down below so people can check it out, and that'd be helpful for them. So I'm sure that's a great tip and useful tool that people can use. So
Yeah.
we'll the second question, and we'll see what comes out of the pot. Now I know people will be looking at this thinking about putting a goldfish in and what have it. The Dutch originally used it's meant to be for cocktails, and now they obviously to use it. So I'm sure at some point when we're finished and we give that a go. So, second question: what has been the biggest controversy, okay, in the board game industry over the past 5 years? So, there's anything that pops out you think, that's been very controversial.
Controversy. Put me in the hot seat. Um, it's tricky. I mean, there have been I can think of plenty of controversial um, elements that have shown up in board games. Like people could say that I could see legacy games being controversial because people don't like the idea that their board game is disposable or that they're ripping up a card. Like that's pretty controversial to some people. I embrace it myself. It's fun. Um, I would say maybe app games. Like that seems to really draw a line in the sand. There are some people that when a game is announced that has an app in it, like requires you to have an app to play this board game. They're like, nope, not touching it. And it's just for whatever reason they are they want their board games and their digital game consumption to be separate, and that's fine. Um, so
I would confess and say I'm very much one of the hosts. It's always that I love technology. My partner loves technology. She teaches it. Um, I'm not a fan, and I have to say, I'm probably one of those who dislikes using apps when I'm playing a game because I want to disconnect myself from technology. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there, and it'd be interesting to know if anyone else feels that way or feels differently. And I know you've got this argument, haven't you, that well, the app might discontinue, and then I've got a board game sitting there that I can't play. Well, it's about the now and then, isn't it? When you get that game, about playing it and embracing it for what it is and enjoying it. And there's some great apps there that work really well with board games. I suppose that makes a difference, doesn't it?
yeah, I mean, as a designer, the idea of an app in a game is really exciting because it can allow you to make a game that couldn't exist otherwise. Like you've got a computer sitting in your pocket every day. If we use that, you can not only enhance a board game, but you can actually create entirely new genres of stuff, which I think is quite cool. But I understand there are downsides and detractors.
Yes, absolutely. And you've got some games that subtly use it. So if we take a look at escape room games, now they use it subtly where you might just put a code in, then tell you maybe what cards draw next, or I give you a little bit more information. So it can be used in subtle ways where it doesn't really detract you too much. If you one of these I'm not using any technology when I'm playing a board game type of people.
Yeah, I think.
I'm admitting you're all sitting and more, don't you, into board games?
hmm Like bringing up the escape room um, genre is a good example because I can think of Unlock. They do their app, like it's a timer to see like if you can finish the scenario in time. But the one thing that it does is it lets you enter in secret information. The app can tell you whether you were correct or not, like a number for a safe or a passcode to open a door. And those sorts of things are very difficult to do in just the physical space without spoiling the game or without having a game master. Um, so uh, I'm personally on board with apps and games as long as you do it right, as long as it's not in the way of you playing the game.
Absolutely, and that seems to be the key element there, doesn't it?
You know,
But it'd be interesting to see what other people think. So let's know in the comments down below. What do you like? Apps and games? Don't you mind them? Are you one of these anti-app people that don't want to be using technology? So let's know in the comments down below. So let's move on to the third question. Let's see what comes out. So if you could have either 100 small board games or 100 snacks of your choice, which one would you pick?
okay, that's a fluffy one. 100 small board games or 100 snacks of my choice. Do I get to pick which 100 small board games there are?
You can choose which ones.
Yeah, okay. Um, I mean, I'd probably pick the board games, right? Like, I love snacks, but and to be fair, my shelf doesn't have any more space for games. I keep looking over here at my game shelf. Um, there's no more room for games, but I'd find somewhere to put 100 small games.
I think, the difference is, unless it's one of those unusual snacks where you can't really get, so you're thinking, that might be different. You might think differently, but once they're eaten, they're gone. A board game will stay, So
Yes.
I'd be interested to see when else would pick a snack over depends what you like your food as well, doesn't it?
It might be more interesting if it was 100 snacks or 10 small board games. And what's the math there? Where's your break point of snacks versus board games?
Yeah. We might actually use that to tweak that question then the next time round. Fantastic. Let's move on to question 4. So, what was the most unique and meaningful moment for you in the board game industry?
The most unique and
Yeah, the most unique moment. So, was there a part in terms of that for me was the kind of wow moment. That was that, the pin drop to say that to me was a unique moment in that board game industry. Maybe you designed the game, discovered that wow, that just worked, out my expectations. I didn't expect that to go that way. So something that really dropped.
yeah, that's a good question. I can think of like a handful of times, like, but which one do I pick? Yeah, I'm thinking of like my first game convention I went to, perhaps. But I think I'll pick when I was working on Battlestar Galactica, the board game. There was um, a point during the development of that game where we would finish up a game, and then I'd get people around the office coming up to me asking me, "Hey, when are you playtesting again? When are you doing this or that?" And it was one of the first times that I actually had people like approaching me asking to playtest the game as opposed to me like hounding down other people to playtest the game. And at that moment, I kind of realized that that game was lightning in a bottle and that it was going to be like the fact that in its rough state, people were so excited about this game that wasn't even done or balanced or complete yet. People were that excited. It made me realize, like, oh my gosh, like this game could be huge. And it turned out to be like the first, I would say, critical success that I was working on, one of the first breakout hits. Um, and so when you when you have one of those moments, you can't really control it. They just kind of come. Everybody's trying to capture like the biggest, most successful game, and a lot of times you're chasing other games and trying to figure out what the audience wants. But when you stumble upon it, you'll know.
Yeah, it's always like that feeling, isn't it? That gut feeling. You think, well, that's the one. And sometimes you don't know whether a game's going to be successful or not, do you?
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty when I'm publishing a game. Like, I enjoy it. I think it's super fun. I think it's super unique. Are other people going to feel the same way? Everybody's different. We all have our own opinions and preferences.
Yes, absolutely. There's no guarantee is there that anything will be successful, and you never know. Um, but yeah, you certainly had a lot of success with some of your titles, and people just call them voting. You'll see some on the top 100, in sitting there. And I think success can vary in different levels. Can't it? Success doesn't
Yeah.
always mean that's being the top 100 in voting.
And ultimately, like making a board game, it's not a single person's job, right? Like we've got designers and testers, and graphics people and artists and um, producers and salespeople. Like a lot of effort goes into making these games, and the fact that like I get credit for them, that's great, but it makes me feel a little bad for all these other people that like they put in just as much work as I did. Um, and at the end of the day, a lot of it is just I was fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. Like FFG had these great licenses, was surrounded by talented people, and we were able to make great games together.
That's fantastic, and yeah, I'm sure a lot of people like to be in those shoes and just be at the right time, right place at the right time with the right people. And for some people it works, some people it doesn't, and sometimes there's a lot of luck in life, and we just hope
Yes.
that. So let's move on to the next question then. So one question five. Yes, we are. Let's see if it comes out here. Hey, what's the biggest thing, in your opinion, that players don't understand about board game mechanics?
Biggest thing that players don't understand about board game mechanics. Are you asking like stuff that's hidden from view?
It could be. It can also be when games feel convoluted or there's a huge mix of mechanisms in which they struggle to understand and how each of them work, how they work jointly. Or it could be there's a particular mechanism it's quite complicated for people to wrap their heads around. So when somebody's trying to explain how it works, that can maybe cause confusion.
Yeah, I mean, my mind immediately just goes to like the act of writing rule books and how like complicated it is. And at FFG, um, at one point, we decided that there's really two audiences for writing a rule book. You've got the person who's trying to learn the game for the first time, and you've got the person who's playing the game and has a question. And it's very difficult to write a rule book that can serve both of those audiences because you're looking for different stuff. And so when I'm writing a rule book or when I'm reading a rule book for the first time, I'm always looking for like, well, what's the flow of the first user's experience? They're going to be reading through this, and if you're reading rules and you're getting like, okay, on your turn you do this, and then here's four exceptions to, well, don't do this if this happens, and be aware there's one card that breaks this rule. Oh yeah, and there's this thing here. Um, if you have too many of those exceptions, you're going to kind of break people's flow of reading, and they're going to kind of lose their place to where they are. And so my my feeling of like the best way to teach rules and to write a rule book is to um, start at the highest level possible. Like, let's give you the overview of like, all right, what are you trying to do to win the game? What are the what are the steps you're going to go through on the turn? And it's I've heard people put it this way. We call it the game ritual. Like, what is the game ritual? What are the things that you're repeating turn after turn after turn? Is it one player does all of these steps? Is it we go around the table, we each do one, the next player does one? And so once players kind of grasp that ritual and once it becomes natural, um, then the rest of the game is very easy to explain. And so it's just kind of getting over that hurdle. Um, and I don't think that all gamers necessarily understand that challenge of crafting that ritual and making it feel intuitive, and making it easy to explain, but with enough depth to keep people interested in the game. Um, so I guess the complexities of the game ritual would be my answer and how you explain it.
Yeah, and I mean, but it's there's a game that's I've got down here. It's BIOS Origins, and the way the rule book's written, it's written in a thematic way. But I'm looking up and googling some of the words, going, what does that mean? Because I don't understand it. You're trying to translate it, and you can understand why the game designer is certainly trying to make it thematic. But sometimes you need to strip that away just to make it quite straightforward and streamlined to understand. And there's some sort of rule books while we're on that topic that have been written brilliantly, and there's some that have been horrendous and have been a chore to try and understand. And you're right, sometimes just explaining the basics of a ritual, how it works and what you're actually doing in your turn can go a long way to understanding the rest of the game mechanisms.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's the hardest thing to do as a game designer is to write a coherent rule book, and I still struggle with it.
Yeah, well, I'm not a writer myself, and I've certainly the games I've designed, writing the rule book, it's been a chore. And it's been a nightmare. I remember, during the playtesting group, you give them a copy of it, you want to do blind playtesting, and the feedback is, it makes sense, we understand it, but can we write less, so we've got less to read? And you're trying to cram a lot in such a short, many pages as possible. That's a big challenge, and there's a difference
Yes.
amateur writer and a professional writer when it comes to that.
There's a famous quote from I think it was Skunk and White, omit needless words. And that's kind of my every time I'm writing and rewriting my rule book, I always have that in mind. I'm like, is this word needed? Is this word needed? Like, make it as compact as possible so that people don't have to wade through unnecessary paragraphs of text.
Yes, absolutely. And there's some great guides as well on Board Game Geek for anyone who needs a bit of guidance. And there's some great examples in Board Game Geek as well to guide people like that. Fantastic. So we'll move on to question number 6 then. See what we come out with. It's a nice question. So, what was the most exciting moment for you in the board game industry?
It's an exciting moment for me in the board game industry. This is kind of adjacent to it. Yeah, it's related. So we were working on a game, Star Wars Destiny, at Fantasy Flight Games. Um, Lucas Litzinger was the lead designer on it. I was helping out. First of all, it was like a dream to be able to work on a Star Wars collectible card game because when I was a kid, the Star Wars CCG was like the thing that got me into CCGs. It was awesome. So that was a dream all by itself. But as we're working on this game and we get close to the release of this game, FFG decides we're going to make a big deal about this release. We're going to have an event. And so we had this special Star Wars event, which was at the FFG Game Center at the time, where they decked out the whole place to like look like Star Wars. There was like a wall that was like a wall of a Star Destroyer. They got people from the 501st coming in dressed up as stormtroopers, or someone had a remote control R2D2, like actual sized. And as a part of that, there was a panel where we were talking about Star Wars Destiny and various Star Wars games. And for that panel, we actually got Timothy Zahn to appear, who is, I don't know if you're aware of this, if you're a Star Wars fan, he's the creator of Admiral Thrawn, and he wrote the Heir to the Empire trilogy, which this book series was like, I don't know, the biggest thing in Star Wars at the time when it came out, because back then there was no prequel trilogy. The original trilogy had been out for years, and like there were the books, and the books were the canon, they were the universe. And so like to actually not just meet the creator of such an important book series and important character, but also like sit on a panel with him, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots of fans out there. I wasn't a huge fan of that Sean Ryan. I remember watching the old ones, and they MTV were the Pitmull ones. They were the classics that really got me into that. And I suppose when I got older, I kind of faded away from that kind of almost fantasy element of kind of Star Wars, and we're going towards other elements of gaming. And but it's one of the biggest franchises out there, isn't it? In terms of how popular it is, and there's millions and millions of fans worldwide.
Yeah, and I'm one of them, and so just being able to work on a Star Wars game was a dream. It was awesome.
Fantastic, and I'm sure there's lots of people who'd love to be in this show. Let's try another one. So we are number 7. So, if you were coming out onto a stage, what would your entrance song be? So that'd be interesting. So maybe when at a convention you come out on the stage, would you have an entrance song? And Star Wars theme might be
Yeah, yeah, that would be too much on the nose. The Imperial March, like the Emperor marching out here. For some reason, the first thing that popped into my head was Eye of the Tiger. Just imagining like the movie Rocky, right? Um,
that gets everyone pumped, doesn't it?
there we go. Yeah, let's get pumped up. It's get this great build up at the beginning, right? Dun 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 dun. Get you pumped up to go on stage. That'll be my choice. Eye of the Tiger.
Yeah, delivery's going to follow up on that, isn't it? What's a follow up? This epic intro, isn't it? you know. So yeah, it's a great choice, and yeah, I think yeah, one of those songs that are really going to get the crowd going. It's like going to get that fight positive, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Let's see what else we've got. So number eight, and has there ever been a point in the board game industry where you felt this is the start of the decline? Is there a point you felt things are declining?
It's tricky. I mean, I feel like we're still growing as an industry. I feel like the number of board gamers every year is increasing just from people. I think people over the last 10 years have started to learn like there's more board games than just what you grew up playing. There's more than Monopoly and Uno, and games can offer so much more. I don't know if I would say decline, but like there's kind of the rise of Kickstarter has certainly been interesting to watch in the sense that like when it came and people just started throwing things on Kickstarter, and at first there was this honeymoon period where everybody was just like backing everything, like, oh my gosh, this is going to be great. I'll throw my money at this. And I feel like there was one point where I don't know, a handful of years ago where people started realizing like, oh wait, games that you support on Kickstarter will maybe never arrive. And it's hard to actually know the quality of them if you haven't played it yet. Um, and I feel like now, granted, I've never kickstarted a game before. I know it's super challenging and tough. But I feel like we're on the other side of that hump as far as Kickstarters have gone, where it's becoming harder and harder for people to like make a successful Kickstarter. Now, granted, you're always going to have the big players in there. You're going to have people putting out big brands, um, and those will attract an audience. But it's definitely, I think, more challenging now if someone was, say, an indie designer that was trying to get something fresh and new out there, um, than it was 5 years ago, just because people have so many games and you have to work twice as hard to get people to pay attention and be like, well, why should I put your game on my shelf? And I think that applies to everybody. It applies to me as well, even though I don't kickstart games, our studio, we're always thinking like, we know that we're competing against your game shelf. And so how do we provide something fresh and something that's going to appeal to you when you have that many games?
Yeah, it's exactly a good point. And the competition is fierce. I mean, you just have to go on Facebook, look at all these Kickstarter groups, and it's just flooded with new Kickstarters. And the competition is so fast that you're right. You're competing with so many different publishers and individuals and small and big publishers to try and get that game on someone else's shelf, and it's tough, really tough.
Yeah, I would argue that more games come out every year that I want to play than I have time to play. Um, and like there's so many good, exciting games coming out that I'll never even hear of. And then there are the ones that I do hear about, but I have limited gaming hours. I can only meet so many times with my friends and family, and honestly, a lot of my gaming time is testing the projects I'm working on. And so it's a it's a challenge.
Yeah, so yeah, it certainly is. And I'll get more time in the day to play more games, wasn't there? That'd be great for everyone. But unfortunately, we don't have it fit it into what calendar schedule.
A lot of my gaming friends and people who work in the industry, I've heard them say like, "Oh yeah, that's we all have this dream that someday we're going to be sitting in a retirement home with our giant shelf of board games. We'll be like, finally, I can break out that giant campaign game and I've got all the time in the world to play it."
Yeah, well, we don't know what how our perception will be when they're older as well. So take that into account.
That's right. We need to make a board game centric retirement home, and we can all sign up for that.
Absolutely. Right, let's move on to question 9. So, if you had to describe yourself as a board game, okay, which one would you be?
Grab myself as a board game. Bit of a funny answer, but not necessarily a good answer.
Anything that brings your character, anything that's that's definitely
Yeah. I see. I keep looking over at my game shelf. I'm like, what's gonna spark um my my eye keeps being drawn to Cosmic Encounter, um, because like it's a game that's like unpredictable, kind of different each time you play with like so many different options and stuff in there. Like I feel like it's not that I'm necessarily like a completely unpredictable and like chaotic person, but I feel like there are many different facets and different sides to me where I'll go through phases where I'm doing a lot of reading and writing, and now I just want to watch movies. Now I just want to play video games. Now I want to play board games. And so like the variety and the different strengths and weaknesses of a game like Cosmic Encounter is um, I don't know, feels like it's a good fit.
yeah, and I'm not get what game I would be. That's right, that's a good idea. And we actually, me and my partner played Cosmic Encounter. I won't confess we didn't like it. I know a lot of people love that game. Well, Tom Fazen loves it. It wasn't a game for us. It was actually one of the kind of very first board games we played together when we were getting into the hobby. But it just wasn't the game it, sat with. I think it's one of those games, if you were kind of brought up in the industry and you played that quite early on, it was a big game at the time when it came out. It was popular when it first came out. I suppose when I started playing games, it was quite old back then. And games have evolved ever since, but still a classic in a lot of people's collections.
hmm it's a very unusual game, and I think that people either love it or hate it. But it's one of those games that I see a lot of game designers have in like their top games of all time, whether they're their top favorite played games of all times or at least most influential.
Yeah, yeah. It's a bit like Man Murder, I love it or hate it. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, Uh, yeah, I'm sticking the hero side with Boxy. I don't think it's a bad game. I think it's actually well designed. It's just not a game for us. But it's all subjective, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, let's move on to our final question, Corey. So
All right.
let's get out shuffle. Make sure we're getting deep in here. There we go. Anyway, oh, this is this is an interesting one. So, do you read all the comments on social media about your board games, and what do you think about them?
Oh, okay, that's a good one. Um, like obviously I don't read all of them, right? There's just too much and there's too many different channels. Like I don't have every social media platform out there. Um, but I do like stay plugged into it like it is not just a job, it's a hobby. And so like I'll follow Board Game Geek and I'll read reviews that people make on my games and I'll read comments and questions that people leave on the Geek or on Twitter and that sort of stuff. Reddit sometimes. And what do I think of them? I mean, you know how people on the internet are, like no filter. Um, it's uh I feel like if you're working in this industry for long enough, you need to develop thick skin because like some people are going to hate your games or hate particular games that you love. And that's just kind of the way it is. People are also going to love some of the stuff you do. So, um, ultimately, what people say about games that I've worked on. It's not personal. It's not taken. They're not talking about my character. They're not talking about who I am as a person. And so, like, if they give one of my games the greatest compliments, like, sure, it feels good. But at the same time, it's not like gonna boost my ego, and I'm not going to like say I'm a good person now because Joe Schmo liked my game. Um, and at the same time, if someone dislikes my game, like they've got every opinion too. Hopefully they're not too nasty about it. But at the same time, everybody's entitled to their opinion. And when I do read something that's negative out there, I do try to see like, okay, well, do they have a point here? Is there anything that I can use to grow as a designer to make my next game or my expansion or whatever more appealing or more exciting? And I don't know. It it's a chance to grow and learn and just to see other people's viewpoints. You're not always going to agree with them. And that's fine.
Yeah, it's a good point. There's if it's constructive, it's useful and helpful, isn't it? But if it's someone just having a whinge for the sake of having a whinge because they're a keyboard warrior bashing away there, that's not helpful. So yeah, you always get them. You'll always get negative comments, and you're right. It's about not taking it personally if it's about your game, because that's about your game. It's not about you as a person. It's a little bit different if it's a content creator, because it's about them as a person a lot of the time, and that can be personal. But sometimes you're right, you have to have thick skin, and you have to look sometimes past that personal and not take it as it's just me. It's actually, is it something else that actually fit in their disappointment at, or they're actually praising something else? So it's important to kind of look past that personal objective, isn't it, and look beyond it and see, is it actually the item they're talking about, or is it me they're talking about?
Yeah. And ultimately, even if it is you they're talking about, even if it's me they're talking about, like it's some random person's opinion on the internet. Like the best thing to do is to not obsess over it, whether it's good or bad. Like if you're gonna dive into the comments, like do so at your own risk. And if you're the type of person where you know that it's going to bother you, like I don't know, I think I just keep coming up with cliches, right? Thick skin, like, but I think just don't obsess over any of it and just live your life. And the comments are the comments, and maybe useful, maybe not.
Wise words, and yeah, you only live once. Enjoy, and embrace the good moments.
Yes.
So that brings us to the end, and I hope you all enjoyed that. And if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to the channel, and please leave a comment down below with any particular highlights you'd like from today's show, or perhaps you've got some questions you would like to suggest that we can ask guests in the future. And also, please give this video a like if you haven't already done so. I'd like to thank our guest, Corey, for joining us and participating in this Q&A. And I'd like to thank everyone for watching as well. And that brings us to the end. My name's Jay Sears. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, take care.